Supporters of Marine Le Pen's far-right anti-immigration party celebrated in Paris after the national rally took more than 30% of votes in France in the EU election. Le Pen's protégé and campaign head, Jordan Bardella, called on the French president to dissolve parliament.
Being subject to a democratic impasse, the president should defer to the spirit of institutions. We solemnly ask him to consider this new political configuration, to come back to the French people and organise new parliamentary elections.
The far-right's success in the ballot had been expected, but what couldn't have been predicted was that Emmanuel Macron would then appear to heed Bardella's call.
I'll dissolve the National Assembly tonight. In a few moments, I'll sign the decree, convening the legislative elections, which will be held on 30th of June for the first round and on the 7th of July for the second.
The shock move was prompted by Macron's party taking only 15% of the vote in the EU ballot, an embarrassing result. Macron said it was clearly time to give choice back to the people. A jubilant Marine Le Pen could not have agreed more.
We are ready to turn the country around, ready to bring France back to life.
Macron's decision is fraught with risk. He has 3 weeks to convince French voters that a far-right dominated parliament and possible government would be a disaster for France.
Are you ready to vote for a party which will undermine Europe, or do you think that France is stronger in a stronger Europe? That's the message. That's the point he's going to try to make to the French people.
It's a gamble that could pay off. Anti-far-right protesters gathered in Paris soon after Macron's announcement. But it's a gamble that could also backfire. If the far-right do well in the parliamentary election, the result could provide Le Pen with the perfect stepping stone to become president in the 2027 election race. Natasha, Butler, Al Jazeera, Paris.
Let's take this on now with Olaf Boehnke, who's the Director and Senior Advisor at the Alliance of Democracies. Joins us now from Berlin. Great to see you there, Olaf. Where do we start? Opinion polls predicted historic gains for radical far-right parties. They certainly surged, but the centre still holds. So how do you assess the overall situation?
No, you're absolutely right. So the pro-European coalition diminished but holds, and I think Ursula von der Leyen is on a very straight way back to her second term as president of the European Commission. It was a good night, definitely, for the center-right parties, and a very bad night for the left and the Green parties. But the big landslide victory of the far right actually has not happened so far. But it depends pretty much in which country you look. So if you look Italy, France, Austria, they, of course, the right-wing parties actually came first. In others, it looks different, moderate in Germany and in Netherlands. And in the Scandinavian countries, for instance, actually, they did not play very well. So therefore, it's a mixed bag. But this is, of course, what you get if you have 27 national member states actually voting. And
right.
A lot of domestic politics, of course, was in that game, too.
Sure. And what about France? Are you surprised that Macron felt that his hand had been forced enough to call this snap election?
Well, yes and no. So he was running out of options, to be honest. And this was a scenario, actually, which was coming for quite a while now. And he reacted in a very typical Macron move, actually. He's playing big poker, and it's a risky bet, of course. So I think his bet is that the Le Pen's party, actually, the Rassemblement National, will win these elections. And then she must become prime minister under his leadership until 2027. And in a way, actually, he hopes, I guess, she will wear out herself. And maybe then in the end, if he reacts and acts as the international statesman, which the role he likes very much, actually, her party will be less favorable to the electorate. But of course, as we said, this is a very risky bet. Let's see how this works out.
Now, von der Leyen says she'll build this kind of bastion against the extremes from the left and the right. How do you build a consensus in such divisive times?
Well, the center parties, actually, right and left, would build a comfortable majority. So if you take the EPP, her party family, together with the Social Democrats and the Green Party and the Liberals, actually, so they can have more than 405 or 50 votes, I think, actually, so which is a very comfortable majority. The question is if she wants to build such a broad coalition, or if she's eager, and her party group, actually, to go more in a decisive way, to take it a little bit more conservative. And then this was the one big question she not refused to answer during the election campaign, but if she would be willing to cooperate and coalesce, for instance, with Meloni's party in Italy. So she always made this point. She never answered this straightforward, but she said, actually, so she has three criteria that need to be pro-European, pro-democracy, pro-Ukraine, and these were the three categories, which kind of fulfills what Meloni actually stands for at one part, because she's leading this part. So the right-wing parties actually are divided into these two camps. The one is quite pro-Ukraine, which is headed by Meloni's party, and the other one is pro-Russian, which is headed by Le Pen's party. So, but the Social Democrats and the Greens said straightforward, we are not going into backing you if you coalesce with if you will be backed also by Meloni. So this is the big question, actually, where she puts her eggs into which basket.
Okay, so overall across Europe, given the fact that some of these far-right parties don't even talk to each other, how much of a force can the far-right be in Europe, and will that continue to build that support for the far-right?
I mean, the irony is, of course, or they made and they gained, of course, extra seats, but so they are all nationalists in the first place. So therefore, cooperating in a superior objective and goal, actually, is not really their beloved exercise. So therefore, as we have seen, so they had been divided into two camps. Even the more radical camp of the ID group actually kicked out the German AfD because they thought they are too radical, and this would maybe an obstacle for Le Pen actually to become president. So therefore, I see a lot of controversy here. The question is who ends where, and these groups are not as stable as we know them on the national level. So it's not a natural thing that everyone actually who had been part of these groups in the previous election period will become so. So I think the biggest potential is to be the main spoiler of things, so that things will move much slower when it comes to transformation in the energy sector, climate change, on migration, on foreign policy, support for Ukraine. I think this is the biggest potential for them actually to block things instead of really creating their extra grounds here.
Then bring it around full circle back to Ursula von der Leyen. How guaranteed do you think she is, in fact, of holding the presidency of the European Commission, especially given that Meloni of Italy is saying that it's too early at this point to guarantee a second mandate?
Of course, everyone is trying to keep their leverage and their powder dry. So therefore, there will be a lot of negotiation and deals going behind the circuits. We have all the commissioners, which also need to be completed. So who's sending which commission? We have the national governments here with the European Council, which has the right actually to nominate the next president. But then actually the parliament is the final institution to vote on, and we have seen this in the last period. So when Ursula von der Leyen actually came out of nowhere, but I don't expect something like this to happen this time. So it looks very much, so the EPP as the strongest parliamentary group now here announced her as her Spitzencandidate. They made the race here clearly. So therefore, I think it looks very good for Ursula von der Leyen to enter a second term here.
All right, Olaf Boehnke, that's a comprehensive review of where we're at. Appreciate that. Thank you very much for joining us here on Al Jazeera.
You're welcome.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.